Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Hello, 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 and welcome to the Larry Yates As Is show. This isn't Larry today. He's off and doing some programs on the East Coast. So a shout out to Larry. We're always happy when you're here, and I'm sometimes happy when you're gone. So the good news is, though, he left me here to do the program. This is Carolyn Wilkins. And I have an amazing guest today with me, Marcus Tiggs, who I'll introduce to you shortly. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And as we are celebrating the world around us and celebrating this particular day, I was actually with some young people today at an elementary school, and I asked some of the Hispanic parents whether they were going to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And they said, well, actually, they were just going to have fun with the younger children. But as they get older, the children who are 10 and above aren't as interested. So I guess it's an opportunity to share history about Mexico, to share some of the things that are going on. And I imagine that some of the presidential candidates are probably not celebrating Cinco de Mayo. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to say hello to everyone, to all of our listeners. We're happy that you're here. And today's program is going to be focused on politics. One of the favorite things that Larry likes to talk about. So perhaps he'll call in if he has an opportunity. But if not, he left me some questions that he'd like me to ask our guest. And as I mentioned, this is Marcus G. Tiggs. He is an attorney, a community activist, and has done many things as an educator and a support in the community. So thank you and welcome, Marcus, for being here.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And we met in a very interesting way. Mr. Tiggs wound up being on the ballot for the city of Culver City as one of the council members. So he ran for the city council. There are 6 seats that are made available, and 3 were opened this year. One person was reelected, Megan, and unfortunately, Mr. Tiggs did not get a seat this time, but I know that this was the first time and there's other opportunities. But I had a chance to meet him when there were open mics for the candidates. So my first question for you is, would you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you wound up running for Culver City City Council?
Sure. I was born in Los Angeles. I'm 53 years old. I was raised in Los Angeles as well. Uniquely, I attended a French lycée, le Lycée Français de Los Angeles. My mother is of French descent, so I used to be able to speak French pretty darn good. In addition, uniquely, I was a competitive figure skater
Oh, really?
in Culver
Okay.
City. That was my home ice. I was a member of All Year Figure Skating Club,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that throughout my adolescence. After that, I went on to college, went to Pepperdine University. I got a degree, of course, in French, and
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, broadcasting. Uh, After that, I was in the ROTC program. I was active duty in the military for
Mm-hmm.
4 years. Thereafter, I went to law school, and I did reserve forces duty, ultimately being deployed a few times,
Mm-hmm.
retiring as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. As far as politics in Culver City, it's always intrigued me, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe I can make a difference, and that is one of the reasons why I ran this go
Mm-hmm.
round.
Wonderful. Uh, your background is very intriguing. Uh, I noticed that you did attend a French school, and you majored in French in college. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was easy.
That was that part was easy because you had gone through that. And is your mother is from a French speaking country?
My grandfather was born in France.
In France.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. I love France. I love Paris. I've been to many places in France and long for the wine ongoing because the wine is different
Yes, it
in
is.
France than it is here. Even the imported wine from France, there's something they do different.
I love the cheese.
And the cheese, yes, wonderful. So now, how did you get from majoring in French to going to law school? What was the impetus, or was there something happening around you that had you make that change?
Well, really, the impetus was there wasn't a whole bunch I could do with a degree in French
Mm-hmm.
in broadcasting.
Yes.
I had come out of the military from active duty as a field artillery officer, and people always said, Marcus, you should go to law school. So I figured, well, maybe I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I wasn't the best student, but I passed the bar the first time.
Really?
So,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
fantastic.
And for that, a lot of that is luck. But in my mind, what I said to myself is, if I do this, I don't want to look back and say I could have done something differently or I should have done something. I wanted to give it the best shot I could give.
Yes.
And that's what I did, and I was lucky to pass the bar the first go round.
That's excellent. I know many people have gone to law school and they're on try number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's amazing that you were able to do that. And I also gather that you wound up specializing in bankruptcy law, and that's what you've been focused on. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. First job offer I got, which was the best one, was Slate & Leone. It was a boutique law firm. It had been around since the 50s. Ultimately, it shuttered. All they did is bankruptcy, primarily consumer bankruptcy, representing individuals. And the beauty of bankruptcy, from my point of view as an adjunct professor and practicing in the area, is that all the areas of law converge on a bankruptcy. You're going to court, you're doing motion practice, you're doing trials, I have a few appeals, and you have a heavy client interaction. Plus, you're helping people.
Yes.
And that's really important to me.
Well, I mentioned a little bit before we started the program that I wondered whether bankruptcy was high, and your response was not at this time. So I was actually surprised. Would you share with the audience what has happened in the past 10 years?
Sure. When the bankruptcy laws changed in 2005, it's called BAP-CEPA. Right before it changed, a lot of people were filing bankruptcy. We're talking about millions in the country. And then from 2005 through, I want to say, 2011, 12-ish, we had a lot of bankruptcies. The bankruptcy firms, we were all very busy. After, let's say, the mid 2012, things have slowed down. Whether it was mortgage companies were not actually foreclosing like they used to, or people have done their refis or have done loan mods. I can't say that the economy is a lot better, but people have not been using bankruptcy as a mechanism, at least up until probably about a few months ago. Our practice has increased over the last couple of months, but it's been slow for a good 5-6 years.
Well, I know that there was a certain period where people were losing their homes. The mortgage companies were had put people in places that they probably did not afford, and bankruptcy seemed to be an outlet for them. I had mentioned that I was involved with a church in Long Beach that we actually almost we went into foreclosure. And when I spoke to attorneys who were involved in bankruptcy and foreclosure, they were inundated at the time. So we wound up not having to do that. But I was able to research some of the things that were necessary to be involved, the paperwork that was required, and it is a mess of paperwork.
There's a lot.
that
There's
you
a
have
lot
to
of
have.
moving pieces.
Yes. So I know that you also you're not only working with corporations but individuals. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
And businesses.
And businesses. And you mentioned churches. We had one client which was a church, and it was the first church that I did a bankruptcy for. I'm Catholic, so I'm not familiar with certain type of Baptist churches, etc., where you have elders, you have trustees.
Yes.
And it was a culture shock for them, a culture shock for me. And I mean
Yes.
it this way because there's so many reports. Or a comment would be, well, Marcus, we don't normally do it that way.
Yes.
We do it this way. I said, yeah, but it's not going to work with this bankruptcy if you're going to emerge from the case.
Right.
As far as individuals, typically you would see someone might be losing a house, might be losing a car. There could be a wage garnishment. Most people, when they come to see me, it's usually the last resort.
Yes.
Most people just don't want to file bankruptcy. And, a lot of people believe that if someone files a bankruptcy, they just loaded up the credit cards and they're just going to file the case and they knew they were going to file it. Not exactly. A lot of times people have been making payments on these debts and they're just trying their best.
Yes.
And it's really tough.
Well, I appreciate the work you're doing. I know you have brought relief to people, and it's not an easy process, and it really takes a type of person that has patience, I believe, as well as being able to communicate with a client. Often I found that a lot of attorneys, just like doctors, aren't the best communicators in the world. They live in their world, and it's not always easy to communicate with people in their other world. So what you told me actually about that situation and the other church said that you at least were conscious of them maybe having a different perspective.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And you're spot on because even myself, I sometimes will fall into this category with a client where I'm trying to give them the information that they need to make that informed decision. And at the same token, I'm very conservative on the advice. I'm not going to say, well, everything's going to be all right.
Yes.
I said it could be all right, or it could take this other path. But we need to be prepared for it not to be all right. Because for myself, I put myself in the client's shoes. I don't like surprises.
Yes.
I want to kind of know. I don't expect someone to tell me what's going to happen in the future, but lay it out. I don't want something to pop up and say no one told me about that.
Yes. Well, those of you who are listening, I encourage you to work with an attorney if you have an attorney in your life that is needed for a situation. Please make sure you're asking the right questions, and it's okay to not know. It's okay it's the reason you're going to an expert. I worked with attorneys on the East Coast. They actually require real estate attorneys to complete transactions of purchasing homes. In California, you can buy your own home and nobody else has to look at it. But early on, I got a chance to work with attorneys just because I was a property owner and learned a lot because they helped me get prepared for what I needed to look for. So attorneys don't always have the greatest reputation, but I have found that if you work with them, they can be a friend. Now, let me shift a little bit. The reason that I wanted to have Marcus on was to talk a little bit about politics. First, about local politics, and we both live in Culver City, which is a wonderful suburb of Los Angeles. It's not a very large city. There are about 35,000, I believe, in the city. So, by comparison to Los Angeles, which has several million, and a city not far from us, Long Beach, which has over 800,000, Culver City is a small suburb. They have been around for quite a few years. In fact, they're celebrating their 100th anniversary September of 2017. And they're going to start their celebration September 2016 to move ahead and do that. Many of you may know Culver City if you watch TV, because it's the home of Sony Studios and several other studios who have been very active in Culver City for many years. And it's a very lovely community where there are schools, there's community college here, quite a few businesses, and it's become even more popular with restaurants. But I like to go behind the scenes first and look at small city government. And Marcus, you've had the opportunity to be on several commissions and other programs. Would you share with the audience what you see from behind the scenes?
Well, from behind the scenes, I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years, and currently I'm the chair of the Fiesta La Bayona Committee, which is a major event that we do every year at the culmination of the summer. Behind the scenes, what I see is city staff that is committed to keeping our city a great city. Staff listens. I see residents that are appointed to commissions or committees caring about the city and really rolling up their sleeves, spending the necessary time to continue to make retain the greatness of our city. The way you describe Culver City, I couldn't do it any better. I love Culver City. I think we're all ambassadors of Culver City.
Yes.
But there's a whole bunch of dedicated individuals. Even though sometimes we have different ideas, different thought processes, but we all love our city and want to see it continue to do well.
Would you name a couple of the commissions that are active in Culver City?
As far as the city commissions, you have a planning commission.
And what does the planning commission do?
The planning commission, as far as the infill development in the city, the planning commission essentially decides on the projects that are within the city. For the most part, there are some instances where the city council will make the final decision on it. You have the Parks and Recreations Commission, which deals with its title, parks, things for kids, programs, things of that nature. You have the Cultural Affairs Commission, which I believe it's important, but I don't know a whole bunch about it other than they try to keep the cultural stuff in the city and look at how to enhance culture in the city, because culture is very important, whether it's for youth, whether it's for middle age or seniors.
I think it's the Cultural Affairs Committee that does the Martin Luther King program every year.
Correct.
So I know I participate with that each year.
And that's a fantastic program.
Yes.
We have the Civil Service Commission, which is really behind the scenes because they're dealing usually with employee relations in connection with an employee. If there's an issue with an employee and the city wants to do something to that employee, the Civil Service Commission makes decisions in that regard.
Okay.
Let's see. Then you have Landlord-Tenant Mediation Board, which is essentially they're mediators. If there are issues between a tenant and a landlord that do not relate to anything other than rent, they get involved. You have the Disability Committee, which deals with informing the council about issues surrounding people that are disabled, how to make the city more disabled person friendly.
And what about, is there a police commission in Culver City?
There is no police commission.
No police commission. There are in other cities. I know Los Angeles has a police commission that is very active, and people
Right.
people try to attend the meetings in order to have better communication. So Culver City has their own police force,
Correct.
and but do they use the sheriff's department for anything?
Well, the
Or is it-
sheriff is involved if there's an officer involved shooting. The sheriff will investigate the shooting, which is not uncommon for smaller cities that have their own independent police department. I believe the sheriff's department can provide air support because we don't have an aviation branch in Culver City PD, and maybe to some extent forensics to some extent. But beyond that, our our police department is self-contained. We have fine officers that do their job to keep the residents and the people that travel through Culver City safe.
And there's also, I know, Culver City was involved, and you probably participated in the planning with Westfield Development,
Yes.
or Westfield Mall, who is all over the country now
Correct.
in taking over malls, but they did an amazing job in what's called the Fox Hills area. And I believe I heard from going to one of the local meetings, it was in the millions. So I don't want to guess what the number was, but I know it was at least $10 million into that facility. Do you remember?
No, I do remember it when they came for the entitlements. It was really, I mean, the Fox Hills Mall was one of the oldest malls in California, definitely. I think it was built in the 70s. And ironically, my father, who passed, he was a tile contractor, and
Oh,
he
really?
did work
Oh,
on that
interesting.
mall.
Yes.
But it needed a big facelift.
It
And
did.
when Westfields came on board, and I believe they're an international company as far as malls throughout the world, they really did a fine job.
They did, yes.
As you know, Carolyn, even before Westfield was involved, the Fox Hills Mall, a lot of the revenue that came through that mall helped support our city as
Yes.
far as business license tax, sales tax, and things of that nature. But it's definitely a point of destination.
Yes. Well, I bring it up because I believe a lot of people don't even think about what is happening in their city and the impact that their involvement has, or their lack of involvement. Something like a mall, I didn't even think about the revenue until I went to one of the meetings. And they have digital advertising. They have billboards that can be seen from the major 405 highway, which even if you don't live in LA, I think everybody knows about 405 highway. And so what you wind up seeing is intriguing, and that brings people from all over who may be traveling through to stop at the mall, so that helps to increase revenue. But the facelift was, it made a big difference. My background is marketing, so I saw the brilliance in what they did. And I didn't think about the impact on the city. I looked at it being a corporation that was gaining money for their organization. But it does bring revenue into the city, and their taxes that are paid and other things.
Yes.
So I appreciate that look, as well as some of the commissions that are behind places. I've lived in several different places and have not always paid attention to how the city ran.
Right.
I was there, paid my taxes, drove on the roads, and did what I had to do. Stayed out of court as much as possible. And, that was life. But there is work behind the city. And I believe that you've mentioned that not only are you involved on commissions, but you are volunteering on most of those. Is that correct?
That is
Yes.
correct.
So those of you who are listening, please consider that you can participate in a city, in the operation of a city, and the well-being of a city by giving your time and attention to something that makes a difference to you, whether it's art, economics, the history. I know Culver City has a historian. There's also cultural affairs and roads and planning. So if there's a way that you want to make a difference in the city, you can. So I think we're going to have a short musical break. And after that, we're going to move into the conversation of our national election, the political scene that is hot right now with our Republican candidates as well as our Democratic presidential candidates. So we'll be back in a second.
Prejudice. Wrote a song about it? Like to hear it? Here it go. Free your mind.
Free your mind. I am going to make that our anthem for today. Free your mind. And we're back again. This is the Larry Yates As Is show. This is Carolyn Wilkins. I am the standing host while Larry's out of town. And a shout out again to Larry Yates. This is the Larry Yates As Is show. And our guest today is Marcus G. Tiggs, an attorney and a community activist. So we talked a little bit about the city in which we reside, Culver City, California, which is a really picturesque and beautiful city. We don't have as many problems and challenges as some of the cities nearby, although we're in driving distance of many things that go on. In fact, the reason we're going to talk now about the presidential election. And as I have been looking at what's been going on with the debates, I have been annoyed, disgusted, frustrated, embarrassed, all those things about what are they possibly doing. And from the Republican side, it's been bothersome to hear some of the things that are going on. And on the Democratic side, there's been discussion, and they've been getting hot with each other. So I heard somebody say this about the election, that we seem to have a polarized country. But it's so interesting that the two top candidates, or the top candidate on each side, they're both famous people. So we know Trump from his reality TV world, and we know Hillary Clinton from her being the First Lady, as well as Secretary of State. They're two world recognized figures. So these are people that did not just tiptoe into the elections. They're both from my home state, New York, and I'm sorry to say that. There's a lot of good that comes out of New York, and but there are certain ways that people see the East Coast, and we're seeing some of the harshest criticism associated with the bluntness, with the direct speak, with the lack of compassion that is coming from some of the discussion. And I know that the country is polarized and disenchanted with what Congress has been doing and the gridlock in the country, as well as feedback that we've seen on some people feeling like the middle class is losing their position. When I look at Donald Trump, I see issues around immigration, women, Muslims, Latinos. We haven't heard a lot about building the wall recently, but it's still beyond my imagination how anyone would even conceive of that. He has a business brand name, but his behavior is totally unprecedented. I believe if anyone else had said some of the things he said about people handicapped, about women, they would have been tossed off of the scene. But how people continue to vote is beyond me. Now, Mr. Tiggs, Attorney Tiggs, is in fact a Republican.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask him in a few minutes to tell me a little bit about his Republican candidate, if it is his, and what he thinks of on this national election. I'm going to first also mention something about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Now, Hillary is the apparent candidate, will be the nominee. Some people say she lacks enthusiasm. There's some questioning of her. Her trust levels are low. There's some question about what she stands for or who she is, that there may be a different Hillary behind the scenes than there is in front of people. And those that know her say that she's actually warm, funny, brilliant, very educated, very articulate. But the woman that shows up in the programs, in the debates, is someone that people look at cautiously. So we have those candidates, and then there's still burning with the Bernie, and he's still hanging in there with his intention of taking his platform to the convention. Now, my issue with Bernie, and I'm not going to say, where I am politically in general, but my concern about Bernie, we just spent time talking about Culver City. It's a little city. And if someone were the mayor of Culver City and wanted to run for governor, I would wonder if they had all of the experience. On the other hand, if they had been mayor of Los Angeles and wanted to run for governor, I would say they got hit with everything they could get hit with in LA or San Francisco, a larger city, that would give them the experience to be a good candidate. I use that same analogy with Bernie. Did you realize that Vermont has only 600,000 people in the entire state? Now, that's less people who are in a city not far from us, Long Beach, California, which is only, 20 by 20 miles. There are, I think I mentioned this before, only 0.1% Black, 0.1% Hispanic, and I'm sorry, 1% Black, 1% Hispanic. Only 5% are non-white in Vermont. So I'm not getting how Bernie feels he has the experience to actually run a country that has issues about unemployment, issues of jobs, issues of racial tension. He just has not had the experience of doing that. My 2 cents, I'm going to turn it now over to, and I gave you a long introduction. So I want you to jump in, Marcus.
Okay.
If you'll first share with me what you're thinking about from the Republican side, as a Republican and as a Black man.
Okay. Trump is not necessarily my guy. And the reason I say this is I can't tell where he's really coming from, whether this is entertainment when he's talking about a wall or whether it is what he really thinks. As far as Muslims, as far as, I guess at one point he said, we need to record every Muslim that's in the United States.
And stop the entry of any Muslims coming into this country.
Exactly. I mean, we're a country of immigrants, and yes, there are issues, but it just seems like this divisiveness that is articulated, there's a segment of our society, right or wrong, they're embracing it. And they are embracing it. They're running with it. I'll be quite frank with you, Carolyn, probably like a lot of people, I did not believe Donald Trump was going to get the nomination.
No, I don't think anyone did. All the political pundits are all scratching their head because they totally, if you had taken them a year ago and looked at what they said on air, none of them believed he could make it.
And I'm backing up a little bit on saying whether or not Donald Trump can win the general election. Before I said adamantly, no, he can't. The demographics in this nation, it's not the 1980s. There are a lot of Black, brown, Asian people in the country that are going to vote, and they may not be voting for Donald Trump. Now, I just don't know. I really can't say confidently. As far as Bernie, yeah, he doesn't have the experience one might want. But did President Obama have that? I don't know. I think what Bernie is showing is he's showing compassion, and people like to hear that. Whether or not you have a master plan of how you're going to get it done, people like to hear that.
They like to know they're being seen, that their issues are being heard, and that somebody may be paying attention to them. I appreciate you being honest in your response.
Okay.
I didn't know what you were going to say or how you were going to get out the door, because if you had been a staunch...
I would just,
I'm
battle cry.
I'm a non-violent person. However, my heart starts beating a little faster because I'm astounded really at the rhetoric behind Trump. And what's so interesting is I'm so glad we're doing this program today, because it was 2 days ago that Ted Cruz said, I'm no longer going to be running. And Case said the same thing yesterday. Or the day before. So they have both stepped aside. I haven't heard the conversation of whether they're giving their delegates over or not. So I'm not sure if that has to wait until the convention. But what happened yesterday and this morning is even more interesting. And that has been major political leaders, Republican leaders, are taking sides right now. And some are saying that I will support Trump, and there are others who are saying they are not going to step into this game, including both Bushes. Can you comment on that?
The only comment, I think everyone is hedging their bets one way or another. If Trump gets elected, it probably is good to be on that winning team. If he doesn't, you probably look better not being on that losing team. That's my take on it. It really becomes a power struggle. The GOP, in my mind, has been struggling. And as a black Republican,
They have, yes.
the GOP was talking about when President Obama got elected, we're going to outreach to African Americans and Latino population. The GOP tried a bit, and then they've given up. I guess it's giving up, and the proof will really be in the pudding what happens in this election cycle. If Trump doesn't win, the GOP is going to have to completely retool.
Yes.
It just completely retool.
There's actually discussion about a third party
I've heard that.
within the Republican Party. So let me go back to basics before we end this. We have about 10 minutes to go before the program is over. But what caused you to step into the Republican side of things? And I'm not saying that it's there's anything wrong with it, but I don't have black Republicans always admit who they are.
Okay.
So since you ran for the council, you had to establish your political affiliation. I mean, you ran for the city office.
Yes.
So that's why I know you're Republican. So would you tell us what it is about the party that attracted you?
Well, the question that you ask is the same question my family's asked me, because my family is a bunch of Democrats, hardcore Democrats. I served in the military for over 20 years as an officer, and I've just become a little bit more conservative. I'm not really conservative, but I'm more conservative than let's say I used to be, if you will. I look at the Democratic Party as far as African Americans saying things that on the surface make sense to the African American community as far as us improving our way of life, things of that nature. But I look at it as more enabling versus a Republican Party essentially saying, black, white, whatever the case might be, these are certain values. Business is a value, work hard, and we all want to have a way of life. I look at the Democratic Party, it's kind of splintered within itself. I don't, what is the Democratic Party really doing for the African Americans? And that I'm not saying any party needs to do that. I think as an African American, I think we as African Americans, we need to help within ourselves. We need to motivate. We need to mentor. That was one of the reasons I was running. I love mentoring young adults, and if they're African American, fantastic, because I've had opportunities, and everyone doesn't have the same opportunity, but it's very important in my mind. And I think the Republican Party, though they're not waving a flag saying African Americans, yeah, but I think there's more opportunities with the party. I have trouble right now with the GOP. So
yes. And the thing I go back to is during the Reagan's days of the mental institutions. To me, that was one of the most damaging effects of that administration, of putting people in the streets who are mentally ill and having nowhere for people to go. They only have a certain amount of time they can go and either be held at a hospital for review or recovery, and there being no funding to support that. So I understand because there's a part of me that's conservative also. I've worked hard. I've pulled myself up by the bootstraps, and I understand that way of thinking, that welfare is not the way of life. However, there's more welfare for white Americans than black Americans. The problem that I see is the conversation that we have about social support, social ideas, always have a face on them. Right. And the face is not the face of this country. The face does not reflect the diversity of the services. It does not reflect how the money is being spent. And I have that kind of brain of statistics, and I look and research where money is being spent. And blacks are not getting the majority of money that comes from the government and government programs. But it looks like they are based on what the media shows, the media talks about, and how it's publicized. When there are problems in schools, it's the same difference that I've seen when they had when we have hurricane problems and what happened in New Orleans and the way they showed people, in the streets and with water over them, and the way they show other cities and other states who have same tragedies, but they don't show people hovering in a stadium. They're shown with greater dignity. So to me, there's a marketing and the way people are represented. And because of that, many people in this country, and I believe those who are backing Trump, have a belief that something's being taken from them, that they are not living the dream that they expected to, because someone of color, someone of another country, someone who speaks another language is taking something from me. However, this is a country of diversity. There's no one who was here originally. Everyone came over on a ship or a boat. Any comments?
Well, yeah, I have a few comments. I look. What you're saying is accurate. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. It's a perception. The media perpetrates it a little bit. We, as African Americans, we hurt ourselves as well. There's enough blame to go everywhere. As I get older, I don't know what we can do as a society to say, society, we're all equal. Even though you're different, let's embrace your differences. I think we're kind of going backwards in some ways.
It feels like we are.
I really do. I think there's some in some areas we aren't. They're great people that are black, white, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, that are really doing things to try to embrace diversity.
Yes.
But right now, I don't know. I have to throw up my hands. I guess it's one person at a time, but I don't know if I'm going to see it. I'm not going to see it necessarily in my lifetime where everyone is just going to be happy and I embrace you. You're white. I embrace you. You're Asian. I'm not going to come up with any stereotype. That's what we as people do, unfortunately.
Well, I see some sense of hope in some of the programs that I attend that are interfaith, intercultural, people sitting together, eating together, children playing together. I was just in the elementary school yard, and they're running around playing with each other regardless of the background. So I know the potential is there. I also know that as I have watched the conversation of Donald Trump and the way he's pointed out people, someone handicapped, and he made fun of that person. I mean, I'm just, I'm saddened that someone in that higher position would do something like that. So I just encourage us to be conscious of how we're voting. We're going to have another show like this before California, by the way, is always late in the primaries. Our primaries are not until June 7th, I believe. So it's the first Tuesday in June. So we are going to make a difference on the map of what happens with Hillary and Bernie. I believe she's already anointed in what is happening there. But we're going to have another discussion about this presidential situation and the candidates in June. But I hope you enjoyed this program. Thank you, Marcus, so much for being here. I don't I hope you don't think I put you under the
No, it wasn't
hot
too
seat
bad.
too
That's
badly.
all right.
Now, if you had said you were a Trump fan,
Right, it
then
could have gone the other way.
It might have gone a whole nother way. However, I believe everybody's entitled to their opinion and to their candidate. But I hope we as a country have our heads on straight when we elect the president of these United States, because they represent all the people. And the world is looking at us. So if you have some closing thoughts, would you please share those?
The only closing thought, thanks for having me on your show. It was fantastic. It was definitely an experience. For the viewers or listeners, if you haven't been to Culver City, definitely check out Culver City. We have our car show that's on Saturday from 9 to 3, sponsored by the Exchange Club of Culver City. And thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And as Larry always says, a nation can rise no higher than it elevates its women. I thank you for listening today, and go in peace and vote appropriately. Peace out.